Something just happened in Cleveland, and it completely exposes what's really going on behind the scenes. Because for weeks, the narrative has been simple: the Browns need a quarterback. Draft one, trade for one, fix the position immediately. But now, that entire storyline is starting to fall apart. And it all comes back to one moment, when Tony Grossi stepped in and shut down the noise completely. No Simpson, no hidden plan to draft him, no secret interest. Just a straight-up reality check. And once you hear that, everything starts to feel different. Because if the Browns really were desperate for a quarterback, you'd see the signs, you'd see the front office traveling, you'd see meetings, you'd see urgency. But instead, silence. No aggressive scouting, no major moves, no real indication that they're chasing anyone. So now the question flips. Is the media completely wrong about Cleveland's plans? Or are the Browns moving differently on purpose? Because here, where it gets even more interesting. Former players are starting to speak out, calling out the media, questioning the narratives, even taking subtle shots at how this whole situation is being covered. And when insiders and former players start lining up on the same side, you have to pay attention. Because this might not just be another off-season storyline. This might be a full breakdown between what's being reported and what's actually happening inside the building. The entire Simpson storyline just collapsed, and it happened faster than anyone expected. Because for weeks, this idea kept floating around that the Browns were quietly interested, that there was a connection building, that maybe Cleveland was positioning itself to make a move. But now, that narrative just hit a wall. And it came directly from Tony Grossi. No speculation, no maybe, just a clear message: stop talking about it. According to Grossi, the Browns are not pursuing Simpson. They're not setting up meetings, they're not bringing him in. They're not doing the things teams usually do when they're serious about a quarterback. And that alone tells you everything. Because in the NFL, interest isn't quiet, it leaves clues. Teams don't just magically draft quarterbacks out of nowhere, they scout heavily, they show up to pro days, they spend time with players, they create a trail. And right now, that trail doesn't exist. In fact, if you compare this year to last year, the difference is impossible to ignore. Last season, the Browns were everywhere, executives traveling across the country, coaches attending workouts, everyone locked in on finding a quarterback. This year, completely different energy. No full front office presence, no aggressive scouting trips, no signs of urgency. And that's exactly why Grossi stepped in. Because at some point, the gap between what's being reported and what's actually happening gets too big to ignore. So he shut it down. But here where things get interesting. Because if the Browns aren't looking at Simpson or any quarterback in that range, then what does that actually mean? There are only a few possibilities. Either they truly believe they don't need one right now, or they're operating on a completely different plan that hasn't been revealed yet. And both options change the conversation entirely. Because the media narrative has been pushing one direction: Cleveland needs to draft a quarterback. But the actions, they're saying something else. No urgency, no movement, no real signs of panic. And in the NFL, that usually isn't accidental. It's intentional. Now, to be fair, things can always change. Draft boards shift, plans evolve, teams adjust based on opportunity. But as of right now, the signals are clear. This isn't a team chasing Simpson. This isn't a team aggressively hunting for a quarterback. This is a team standing still. And when a team chooses not to move in a situation where everyone expects them to, that's when you really have to start asking questions. Because sometimes what a team doesn't do tells you more than anything else. But here where the story really flips, because this isn't just about Simpson. It's about what the Browns are not doing. And that's what makes this situation so interesting. Because if you rewind just 1 year, the difference is night and day. Last offseason, the Browns were everywhere. Front office members traveling across the country, coaches attending pro days, decision makers fully locked in on evaluating quarterbacks. It was aggressive, it was obvious. You could tell they were searching. But now, that energy is completely gone. This time around, Andrew Berry isn't moving like someone trying to solve a quarterback problem. He's not chasing prospects. He's not heavily investing time into this draft class. Instead, everything feels controlled. Calm. Almost like the urgency just isn't there anymore. And that's not something you can ignore. Because in the NFL, front office behavior usually tells you exactly how a team feels. If they're desperate, you see it. If they're unsure, you see it. If they're actively searching, you definitely see it. Right now, you're not seeing any of that. And that raises a bigger question. Why? Why would a team that supposedly needs a quarterback suddenly stop acting like it? There are only a few explanations. 1, they're confident in what they already have. 2, they're planning something behind the scenes that hasn't surfaced yet. Or 3, they don't view this quarterback class as worth the investment. Now, none of those have been officially confirmed. But the behavior points somewhere. Because teams don't accidentally ignore one of the most important positions in football. If they're not attacking it, it's usually because they've made a decision internally. And that's where things start to separate. Because while the Browns are moving with patience, the media is still pushing urgency. You've got analysts saying Cleveland needs to act fast, that they can't wait, that they have to draft someone now. But the front office, they're doing the opposite. No panic moves, no rush decisions, no visible pressure. And that contrast is hard to miss. Because usually when a team is in trouble at quarterback, it shows up everywhere: free agency, scouting, interviews, workouts. But Cleveland, they're quiet. And sometimes silence in the NFL isn't a lack of direction. It's confidence. Confidence that they don't need to follow the narrative. Confidence that they're not being forced into a move. Confidence that whatever plan they have is already in motion. And if that's the case, then everything people think they know about the Browns' quarterback situation might be completely off. Because right now, this doesn't look like a team searching for answers. It looks like a team that already believes it has one. But here, where everything starts to fall apart because the story being told publicly doesn't match what's actually happening. On one side, you've got insiders like Tony Grossi coming out and shutting things down. Clear, direct, no confusion, no Simpson, no heavy quarterback pursuit. But on the other side, you've got the media still pushing the same narrative. Browns need a quarterback. They have to draft one. They can't go into the season like this. And the problem isn't just the take itself, it's how confident it's being presented. Because when you look at the actual moves or lack of moves, it doesn't line up. And that's exactly what former players are starting to call out. You've had voices come out and basically say the same thing in different ways. This is just talk, just noise, something to keep the conversation going. Not something based on what the team is actually doing. And that's a big deal. Because when former players, guys who have been inside locker rooms, who understand how organizations operate, start pushing back on media narratives, it forces people to take a second look. Because they know what real signals look like. They know how teams behave when they're desperate. And according to them, this isn't it. Instead, what they're seeing is something completely different. A media cycle that keeps repeating the same idea, even when the evidence doesn't support it. And that's where the disconnect grows. Because fans are stuck in the middle. They're hearing one thing from analysts and seeing something else from the team. And when those two don't match, it creates confusion. So now the question becomes, why is the narrative still being pushed? There's been a lot of speculation around that. Some believe it's just the nature of sports media. Quarterback drama drives attention, it gets clicks, it keeps people engaged. Others think it's deeper than that. That once a narrative gets started, it's hard to walk it back, even when new information comes out. Again, nothing officially confirmed. But the pattern is there. Because even after insiders shut things down, the conversation doesn't stop. It just shifts slightly and keeps going. And that's what makes this situation so interesting. Because the Browns themselves, they're not feeding into it. They're not making reactive moves, they're not responding publicly, they're just continuing on their path. And that creates a gap. A gap between perception and reality. between what's being said and what's actually happening. And usually when that gap gets this wide, one side ends up being completely wrong. The only question is, which one? But then the conversation took a turn, and it got a lot more personal. Because this isn't just about quarterbacks anymore. Now the spotlight is shifting directly onto Kevin Stefanski. And not in a good way. Former players have started speaking out, and while they're not holding press conferences or making official statements, what they are saying is enough to raise eyebrows. The tone. Frustration. There's been a lot of buzz around comments suggesting that Stefanski's approach hasn't always sat right with players. Not necessarily about his knowledge of the game, because most agree he understands offense, but more about how things are handled behind the scenes. Decision-making, communication, and most importantly, connection. Now, to be clear, these are opinions, personal experiences, nothing officially confirmed by the organization. But when multiple voices start pointing in a similar direction, people start paying attention. Because one of the biggest things being hinted at is a disconnect. A gap between the coaching staff and the locker room. And that's a serious issue in the NFL. Because you can have the best playbook in the world, but if players aren't fully bought in, it doesn't matter. And according to some of these discussions, that connection may not have been as strong as it needed to be. What makes this even more interesting is how it lines up with what we've seen on the field. There was a time when things were working. The Browns had momentum. Stefanski even earned major recognition, including Coach of the Year. Everything looked aligned. But then, something changed. The energy shifted. And while no one is pointing to one exact moment, there's a growing sense that the relationship between players and coaching staff wasn't the same after that. Some have even suggested that certain decisions, especially around key players, didn't sit well internally. Again, this is all based on reports, conversations, and player perspectives. But it adds another layer to everything we're seeing now. Because when a coach starts getting questioned not just by fans, but by former players, it means something. And here, where it connects back to the bigger picture. Because if there is tension, or even just a lack of alignment, it could explain a lot of what's happening right now. The quiet approach from the front office. The lack of urgency at quarterback. The different direction compared to last year. It might not just be about strategy. It might be about control. About making sure the next move doesn't repeat past mistakes. And if that's true, then this situation isn't just about whether Stefanski is a good coach or not. It's about whether the system around him is fully working. Because in today's NFL, talent alone isn't enough. You need alignment. You need trust. And right now, based on what's being said, that might be the biggest question Cleveland is facing. But here, where everything connects, because one name keeps showing up in the middle of all this. Shedeur Sanders. And the way he's being talked about right now. It's not normal. Because this isn't just about potential, it's not just about hype, it's about what people believe he could be for a franchise. There's been a growing buzz, especially among former players, that Sanders isn't just another quarterback prospect. Some are openly suggesting he has the tools to completely change an organization. Now that's a big claim. And to be fair, nothing has been proven at the NFL level yet. But the confidence behind those statements, that's what stands out. Because when players who have been in the league start speaking like that, it usually means they see something real. And that's where things start to get interesting. Because alongside that praise, there's also been quiet criticism about how situations involving him have been handled in the past. Nothing official, no confirmed reports. But there's been talk. Some believe he wasn't always put in the best position to fully showcase what he can do. Others feel certain decisions may have limited his impact at key moments. Again, this is speculation. But it keeps coming up. And when the same idea keeps resurfacing from different voices, it starts to build curiosity. Because if there's even a small chance that his full potential hasn't been fully unlocked yet, then that changes everything. Now bring that back to Cleveland. Because if the Browns are truly stepping back from this quarterback class, And if they're not aggressively chasing players like Simpson, then it raises a bigger question. Are they waiting? Waiting for the right moment? Waiting for the right player? Or maybe waiting for a situation where someone like Sanders becomes a real option? Now there's no confirmed connection here. No official reports linking him directly to Cleveland right now. But the conversation exists. And it's growing. Because when you combine everything, the media confusion, the front office silence, the criticism of past decisions, it creates a scenario where people start looking ahead instead of just at the present. And Sanders fits into that future-focused conversation perfectly. Because he represents something different. A reset. A new direction. A potential franchise centerpiece. And if Cleveland is thinking long-term instead of reacting short-term, then names like his become a lot more relevant than people might expect. Which brings us to the real question. Is this just another name in the conversation? Or is this the one they're quietly watching while everyone else is looking the wrong way? But here, where things start to go deeper, because this might not just be about strategy or coaching decisions. It might be about culture. And that's a much bigger issue. Because when you listen closely to what former players are saying, there's a pattern starting to form, not direct accusations, not anything officially confirmed. But hints, subtle signals that something inside the building hasn't been fully right. There's been talk about a disconnect, nothing explosive, nothing headline-grabbing, but enough to raise questions. A sense that the relationship between players and coaching staff hasn't always been aligned. And in the NFL, that matters more than anything. Because talent alone doesn't win games. Connection does. Trust does. And when those things start to fade, it shows up in ways you can't always measure. Some former players have described it as a shift over time. Early on, things felt strong. There was energy. There was belief. The team was winning, the system was working, and everything seemed to be clicking. But then, something changed. Not overnight, not dramatically. Just slowly. The spark that was there in the beginning didn't feel the same anymore. The connection between players and coaches started to feel different. Now again, this is all based on personal perspectives. But those perspectives matter. Because players are the ones living it every day. They're the ones inside the locker room. They're the ones feeling the energy when things are working and when they're not. And when multiple voices hint at the same kind of shift, it becomes hard to ignore. What makes this even more interesting is how it connects to everything else we've been talking about. The quiet front office, the lack of urgency at quarterback, the media confusion, the criticism of coaching decisions. It all starts to feel like pieces of the same puzzle. Because if there is even a small level of disconnect internally, it could explain why the Browns are being so careful right now. Why they're not rushing decisions. Why they're not chasing narratives. Why they're moving differently. Because fixing a roster is one thing. Fixing a culture, that's something else entirely. And that's not done through one draft pick or one signing. That takes time. That takes alignment. That takes making sure the next move actually fits, not just on paper but inside the building. So while everyone on the outside is focused on quarterbacks, the Browns might be focused on something bigger, something less visible, something harder to fix. Because if the foundation isn't right, it doesn't matter who you put under center. And that's the part nobody is really talking about. At least not directly. And now we get to the part that actually matters, because everything we've talked about leads to one big question. What are the Browns really doing? Because when you strip away the media noise, the rumors, the speculation, what you're left with is a team moving in a way that doesn't match the outside narrative at all. No aggressive quarterback scouting. No panic moves in free agency. No clear signs of chasing a solution. Just silence. And in the NFL, silence usually means one of two things. Either a team is completely lost, or they're completely locked in. And right now, Cleveland doesn't look lost. They look patient. They look controlled. And most importantly, they look intentional. Because think about it. If the Browns truly believed they needed to fix the quarterback position immediately, they would have acted by now. They would have brought in competition, they would have shown urgency, they would have made it obvious. But they didn't. And that's not something you do by accident. That's a decision. Led by Andrew Barry and the front office, this feels like a team that has already chosen its direction, even if they're not saying it publicly. And that's what makes this situation so different. Because instead of reacting to pressure, they're ignoring it. Instead of following the narrative, they're letting it play out. And instead of forcing a move, they're waiting. Now the question is, waiting for what? There's been a lot of speculation around this. Some believe they're confident in their current roster. Others think they're positioning themselves for a future move, something bigger, something more calculated. Nothing confirmed. But the pattern is there. Because teams don't just sit still at the most important position in football unless they believe they have a reason to. And whatever that reason is, it hasn't been revealed yet. Which is exactly why this feels bigger than a normal off-season storyline. Because while everyone else is debating quarterbacks, rankings, and draft boards, the Browns are operating on a different timeline. A quieter one. A more controlled one. And that creates tension. Because if they're right, if their plan actually works, then everything being said right now, every headline, every debate, every criticism gets flipped instantly. But if they're wrong, then all of this silence turns into a problem overnight. And that's the risk. That's what makes this so fascinating. Because right now, Cleveland is betting on something that nobody fully understands yet. They're not showing their hand. They're not explaining their moves. They're just moving differently. And in a league where everyone is constantly reacting, that might be the most dangerous strategy of all. So the real question is whether the Browns need a quarterback. It's this. Do they already believe they've solved the problem and everyone else just hasn't figured it out yet? And when you step back and look at everything together, this situation becomes a lot clearer and a lot more confusing at the same time. Because on the surface, the conversation has been simple. The Browns need a quarterback. Fix the position, draft someone, make a move. But when you actually follow the actions, not the headlines, not the debates, not the noise, just the actions, that story starts to fall apart. Because nothing Cleveland is doing matches that urgency. No aggressive scouting. No panic decisions. No clear signs of chasing a solution. And that's not normal for a team that's supposedly desperate. Instead, what you're seeing is something completely different. A front office led by Andrew Barry that looks calm, controlled, intentional. A team that isn't reacting to pressure. It's ignoring it. At the same time, you've got insiders like Tony Grossi stepping in and shutting down rumors completely. No Simpson, no hidden quarterback move, at least not the ones people are talking about. And then you've got former players adding another layer. Questioning the media. Hinting at deeper issues. Even raising concerns about coaching and culture around Kevin Stefanski. None of it officially confirmed, but enough to make you think. Because when multiple pieces start pointing in the same direction, it's usually not random. And then there's the wild card. Shedeur Sanders. A name that keeps showing up in conversations about the future. A player some believe could change a franchise completely. Now, there's no direct connection to Cleveland right now. But the fact that his name keeps entering the discussion, that tells you where people's minds are going. Forward. Not just about this season, but what comes next. And that's really what this all comes down to. Because this isn't just about whether the Browns need a quarterback. It's about whether they're playing a completely different game than everyone else. While the media is focused on immediate fixes, Cleveland might be thinking long-term. While everyone else is reacting, they might already be set. And if that's true, then everything we're seeing right now, the silence, the patience, the lack of movement, it's not confusion. It's strategy. But here's the risk. Because in the NFL, you don't get credit for a plan until it works. If they're right, this all looks genius. If they're wrong, it all falls apart fast. And that's what makes this so interesting. Because right now, the Browns are betting on something nobody fully understands yet. They're not explaining it. They're not showing it. They're just moving differently. So the real question isn't what the Browns are doing today. It's this. Are they quietly building towards something bigger? Or are they about to find out the hard way that ignoring the noise doesn't always make the problem go away?